The first time he told me he wanted a child, I laughed in his face. Not because the idea was absurd, but because I thought he was joking. Who in their right mind thinks about raising children with a man who once broke your heart into so many sharp pieces that you still bleed when you breathe? But the smirk never left his lips. He was serious, deadly serious. We were in a cafe in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that pretends it's authentic with its rustic wooden tables and overpriced lattes. I had barely sat down, still clutching my coat from the biting wind outside, when he leaned forward with that air of command he always carried, even when we were kids. "I need you," he said, just like that, like we hadn't spent years apart, like he hadn't destroyed me once already, like time was nothing but a cruel trick. The word need burned in my ears. Not want, not love, need. His name was Adrian. My nightmare, my first kiss, my unfinished symphony. And now, sitting across from me, he was the same and yet not the same, older, sharper, and far more dangerous. He was an Omega, but unlike any I had ever known. Powerful, untouchable in his career, with a reputation that made people bow when he entered a room. And here he was, telling me he wanted a child. Not just any child. Our child. "You're insane," I whispered, but my voice betrayed me. My hand shook as I set down my coffee. "You can't just drag me into your plans like this. You don't get to." His eyes softened, but the steel beneath never cracked. "I don't get to? You think I haven't thought this through? I chose you for a reason." I laughed again, bitter this time. "Yeah, because I'm the idiot who still answers when you call." The truth is, I never stopped loving him. That's the sick part. I carried him inside me all those years, through the silence, through the heartbreak, through the long nights where I tried to stitch myself back together. He was a ghost I couldn't exorcise. But wanting him back, that was suicide. "Adrian, listen to yourself," I said. "You're asking me to help you bring a child into this world when we couldn't even keep ourselves together. Do you know how insane that sounds?" His lips curled into something halfway between a smile and a plea. Maybe insanity is the only way to survive in this world. And I hated him for that, because he made it sound almost true. The past we shared was not something I could scrub clean. He had walked away on Sino, not walked, fled. Abandoned me when I needed him most. And now he wanted to rebuild something on top of the ruins he left behind. I should have left right then, slammed the door of that cafe, let the bitter wind carry me far away from him. But I didn't, because the part of me that still loved him, the part one swore I buried, was leaning forward, listening, hoping. Days passed. I tried to ignore him, but Adrian was relentless. Messages, calls, visits to my office. He knew how to slip into the cracks of my life until there was no room for anyone else. And then he brought up the past. "You think I don't regret what happened?" he said one night outside my apartment. The city hummed around us, neon lights flickering on wet pavement. He looked at me like the boy I once knew, the boy who kissed me under a high school bleacher and whispered he'd never let go. "I regret it every damn day. Leaving you was the worst mistake of my life, and I will not let it define us anymore." I swallowed hard. "You already defined us, Adrian. You defined us the moment you left." But that was when fate twisted the knife deeper. He wasn't the only ghost from my past. The one man I thought I'd never see again, Ethan. My ex-lover. My alpha showed up in town like a storm breaking through silence. Ethan was different from Adrian. Where Adrian was fire, Ethan was stone. Broad-shouldered, quiet, his presence like gravity itself. He carried the kind of steadiness that made you want to lean in, to trust. He had been my safe place once, until he too had slipped away, swallowed by his own demons. And now, years later, he stood at my door with a promise in his eyes. "I heard about Adrian," Ethan said. "I heard what he's pulling you into, and I'm not letting it happen. Not again. Not to you." His voice shook, just a little. "I won't let anyone break your heart again. Not even him." My life had become a battlefield between two men who had already destroyed me once. One, an Omega whose power made him dangerous but whose love burned like wildfire. The other, an Alpha whose strength was his silence, whose protection wrapped around me like armor. And me? I was caught in the middle, my heart tearing open all over again. Because here's the thing about love. It doesn't care about reason. It doesn't care about history or logic or the scars we drag behind us. Love only cares about the pieces of yourself you're willing to surrender. And God help me, I didn't know how much more I had left to give. The court hearing was supposed to be routine. Just paperwork, signatures. A sterile room filled with lawyers who would never understand what it meant to carry not just a child, but a legacy of shame, pain, and defiance. But nothing with Adrian had ever been routine. He walked in wearing that unshakable confidence, his presence filling the space like fire eating oxygen. Every eye turned toward him. The judge adjusted her glasses. The clerk cleared his throat. But all I could see was Adrian's steady gaze locking on me, as though I were the only person in the room who mattered. And then I felt it had shift. Not in the court, but inside me. For years I had been running from him, from Ethan, from the memory of what we were. But in that sterile courtroom, with Adrian's name echoing through the chamber, I realized that what we were wasn't something I could run from. It was something I had to face. Outside, after hours of tense exchanges, legal jargon, and unspoken truths, we finally stepped into the fading sunlight. Ethan was there too, silent as always, but his silence was not absence, it was protection. His hand brushed my shoulder once, a reminder that even if I shattered, someone was ready to catch the pieces. Adrian stopped on the courthouse steps, looking at both of us. "I don't want to fight," he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual command. "I don't want to tear you apart, or tear us apart. I want something that feels like a future. I want a family, and I want it with you." I stared at him, my heart a battlefield of conflicting truths. "You left me," I whispered. The words were raw, a wound I never let close. His eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "And I will spend every day of my life proving I'll never do it again." It would be easy to say that in that moment, forgiveness bloomed like a sudden flower. But love isn't easy. Forgiveness isn't instant. What came next was not a kiss, not a promise sealed with perfection, but a long silence filled with unshed tears and unspoken fears. Ethan finally stepped forward. "If you hurt him again," he said to Adrian, his voice low and certain, "you'll answer to me." Adrian nodded, not with arrogance, but with humility. Fair. And somehow that was enough. The months that followed were not magical. They were messy, filled with late-night arguments, slammed doors, quiet reconciliations. There were moments I thought it would all collapse again, that I was foolish to believe men like Adrian or Ethan could be part of something steady, something safe. But then there were other moments. Like the first time Adrian placed my hand on his stomach and whispered, "Feel that?" As the faintest flutter of life moved beneath his skin. My breath caught, and for the first time in years, I felt something pure hope. Or the night Ethan cooked us dinner, awkward in the kitchen, cursing when he burned the garlic bread, but smiling anyway as Adrian laughed until he cried. We weren't a perfect family. Not yet, but in that laughter, in that messy kitchen, we were something real. The town talked, of course. Whispers followed us in grocery aisles, at the post office, even in church pews. Two men raising a child together, with another man still in the picturite, was scandal wrapped in rumor. But scandal never raised a child. Love did. And no matter how heavy the whispers grew, Adrian held his head high. Ethan stood beside us, immovable, and May finally stopped hiding. The night the baby was born, everything changed. Adrian's hand clutched mine so tight it left bruises, his forehead slick with sweat, his voice a raw cry of pain and determination. Hours stretched like eternity until, finally, the world shifted with a single, fragile wail. The nurse placed the child in Adrian's arms, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw him break. Not in weakness, but in wonder. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Ours. He's ours." Ethan stood close, silent, but the softness in his eyes betrayed everything he couldn't say out loud. And May held them both, my heart finally surrendering. Not to one man, Not to a single promise, but to the messy, complicated truth that love had never abandoned me. I had only been afraid to claim it. The years after weren't easy. Parenthood never is. But I remember one evening, years later, when our son, wild-haired, mischievous, too smart for his own good, ran through the yard as fireflies flickered around him. Adrian was laughing on the porch, Ethan was fixing the fence, and I stood there, watching the life we had built. It wasn't the life I imagined when I was young, when I thought love was supposed to be clean and perfect. It was harder, but it was real. So when people ask me what it was like being dragged into Adrian's plan, being forced to confront Fury and the past, I tell them the truth. It was terrifying. It was painful. It was impossible. And it was worth everything. Because in the end, I wasn't just given a second chance at love. I was given a family. And that, more than anything else, is forever. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.